Hi, I'm Derrick Jensen. This is Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network. My guest today is Leah Lemieux. She's an author, lecturer, researcher, videographer, and producer who's been involved with cetacean protection, education, and conservation initiatives for over 20 years. Her work, collaborating with key individuals and NGOs, takes her to many different countries, including Japan and the remote Faroe Islands, focusing on developing educational tools to foster positive solutions from within whaling nations. So first, thank you for your work, and second, thank you for being on the program.
It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
So just tell listeners a little bit about dolphins. Just introduce them to dolphins. Who are they? What is their historical range? How many species are there? How different are these species? And so on.
All right. Well, dolphins are actually very small, toothed whales. There's about 89 species of whales in the world, which include the dolphins. 70 of those are called odontoceti, which simply means they have teeth. The rest of them are baleen whales, like the familiar humpback whale. So about 40 of those species are considered dolphins. In addition to those, we've got porpoises, which are often confused. Porpoises are smaller, they don't have a long beak, and their teeth are slightly shaped differently. So that's really what dolphins, scientifically speaking, are, is this 40 species. They range in size from about 4.5 feet, which would be the little Maui's dolphins in New Zealand, and they get as big as the familiar killer whale, or orca, which can get up to 30 feet. So that's, and the dolphin most people know is the bottlenose dolphin, which is the gray kind of flipper dolphin. And they range in size from about 7 feet in the Caribbean all the way up to almost 12 or 13 feet, the species up in Scotland. They're very big, brawny dolphins. So they're a wide-ranging type of animal. Different species are found all the way up to the edge of the Arctic, all through the tropics and subtropics. And they're a very successful species. At least till we came along, they were doing very well. They're very ancient. They've been around in some form for as much as 50 million years. I think they've been in their present forms for about 25 million years. So, yeah, Earth and dolphins have been together for a long time.
And you said that they are, and also you said up to the Arctic, and they're like in the Mediterranean. Aren't there also some species in freshwater, just a couple of species?
Oh, yeah, there's very few species that have made their way into rivers or estuaries. Probably the most famous one is the boto, who's in the Amazon basin area. Unfortunately, the Chinese river dolphin, called the Yangtze, was functionally declared extinct in 2006, and it's because of habitat degradation and gillnet fishing. And even though the warnings were being put out by experts for decades, the development and pollution in China was such that the dolphins, they're functionally extinct now, these wonderful, strange-looking river dolphins. So we've already lost one of them.
So you said that they were doing quite well until we came along. What is the... Well, let's back before we go there. Do we have any idea? There were 60 million bison on the plains. I just talked to somebody about beavers the other day in North America, and she said that there were between 40 million and 600 million beavers in the United States. I didn't know there's that many, and they've been crashed. I mean, I guess I've heard just extraordinary accounts of passenger pigeons in flocks so large they darken the sky for days at a time. Do we have anything like that on dolphins with just extraordinary numbers? Do we know anything about how populous they were?
Well, one of the big problems in conserving these creatures internationally through treaties is that the scientists will not agree on the numbers now, and we certainly have a very foggy idea of what they were back in the day. Attempts have been made with certain whale species at the beginning of when whaling really became international to guess, and we think, for example, blue whales are at 3 to 5% of their original numbers. But with all the different species, some of the species have never been seen alive. Some of them are only discovered recently. So you can imagine how our science on their numbers and populations it's terribly lacking and always has. What we do have are accounts from the sort of great days of sailing ships when they would see species of whales in bays sort of filling the bays, and you'd see the backs of the spouting whales sort of all resting in a bay and with their calves and babies, and there's etchings and things of this. And these are in areas where the whales are gone or there's just very few now. Stories of sort of wonderful troops of leaping dolphins sort of filling the horizons. But it's very vague. We don't have proper numbers. We do know that being apex predators in the ocean, dolphins have dwindled terribly, like every large species of marine creature, because all their food sources are dwindling because of overfishing and pollution in the main part.
And so I guess that takes us to can you talk about some of the, would you rather talk about the threats to dolphins first, or would you rather talk about why you're doing this work and how you came to this work? Which would you rather talk about first?
I think we'll do the threats and then I can get into some particulars, because one threat in particular, well, I guess two of them affect the public more than others, but it's good to just get a sense. And so I would say probably, other than climate change and pollution, which are, of course, universal problems, especially where we have more industrialized seas, but with ocean currents, these waste products can get everywhere and are being found even in the most remote ecosystems. So in addition to those things, just to mention one thing, the BP oil spill, I mean, they are still trying to get their heads around the damage that has done. And when it's in the ocean food chain, you don't always see the damage. But cetaceans are still washing up that are clearly have been damaged by that whole fiasco.
So let's back up to before the BP oil spill. And I know you said that the numbers aren't there, but can you just give some sort of best guess as to how many? I mean, I have no idea. How many dolphins of different species might have been in the entire Gulf of Mexico? Are we talking 100,000 total? Are we talking 10,000 total? 1 million total? I have no idea.
In totals, we'd be looking at low millions, I think.
For the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, but you have to remember that the dolphins might not be staying in there. Some species will be migrating up the coast of North America, and some may be getting as far as South America and the Caribbean area. So some species we know stay in a pretty small home territory, and other ones move great distances through the seasons, and it's really poorly understood. But yeah, you might be able to be looking at that. But what scientists know, because a lot of times they're studying just the species in a smaller area when it comes to marine animals, is that everybody's study groups are being hit. So even though the collective work to get us the big picture numbers are really hard to come by, everybody can see their study populations in that area getting hit.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about the BP spill harming them.
Well, I think bycatch in nets is probably slightly easier to measure for us. It's a global impact. This is from offshore trawling interests for fish that we want to eat. Gill nets, which are inshore, they're sort of invisible, cheap plastic netting that get hung in certain areas, like at the mouth of rivers or key areas where people are trying to find fish. Open water drift nets, which are the same type of plastic netting that get left out for miles and miles and miles in the open ocean. The infamous tuna fishing, which most people have heard of, that is still happening. Dolphins dying in tuna nets. So collectively, those are the sort of industries that are out there fishing the seas to provide human beings with fish, and they are all responsible for taking out whales and dolphins and seabirds and turtles and lots of marine life. That's the problem with all those is they're non-discriminate, so they're picking up everything and taking out all these different types of marine life, and of course dolphins are in there too.
I was just at a local. I live in a tiny town on the ocean, Crescent City, California, and I was just at a restaurant not very long ago, maybe a month ago, and I overheard a guy at the next table who was a shrimper. He used to be a shrimper. And once again, I know nothing about these people. I'm just eavesdropping on their conversation. And the shrimper said, I had to get out of it because I couldn't bear it that every time I brought up a net, it was filled with all these other animals who were dead. And I don't believe he gave a number, but he was just, it's extraordinary to me that here's a person who, he actually quit the business because he just couldn't stand killing everybody else anymore.
I would say to be a fisherman, I think shrimpers they trawl, which means they're dragging things around the sea bottom. So you're not only catching everything, you're ruining all the homes of the bottom dwellers as you go. So I imagine it's terrible carnage when you pull in the nets. And if you're a human being with a conscience, you would hope sooner or later that would sink in. So I'm glad that guy's out there. I wish we had more like him.
So do you want to talk more about different threats or go into any more detail on any of those?
Well, we'll get now, I think, to the threat that other than trying to not eat too much fish or really, really do your homework when you're buying it, to try and find sustainable fish, which is harder and harder to really find something that fits that bill. You should probably stay away from tuna because the industry is so mixed up in these technologies that capture dolphins, and they rarely have observers on board to really tell what's happening. Some small companies do pole and line tuna fishing, and it should say that on the label, and then you should really do your research. Pole and line is the only way to catch just the tuna and nobody else. So if you're hell-bent on tuna, you really have to try and find a company that does pole and line and make sure that they are doing what they say they're doing. But other than the fishing, capturing and killing dolphins directly, because the fishing isn't after the dolphins, the fishing's after the fish, that's another threat that should be discussed, and that's the one I'm working on. I found myself working on the most directly. So capturing dolphins from the wild for marine parks and swim programs and the international trade in dolphins is a serious threat, and it's a growing threat. And then there's countries, some of which who are also responsible for capturing them for aquariums, who hunt them to eat them. So that would include Japan, parts of Japan, I should say. It's happening in remote places for the most part. So Japan, the Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic, the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific, Peru kills up to 15,000 dolphins a year, and it's a double whammy there because they're harpooning dolphins in order to cut them up, to put them in traps to catch sharks, to fin the sharks for shark fin. So Peru's sort of doing a double bad there. There's been an expose on that recently with one of my colleagues. So the government is being brought to bear somewhat in Peru. They are starting to take responsible action against this there, but in places like Japan and the Faroe Islands, it's ingrained in local culture. So the hunting is continuing despite decades of protest, and those are areas I've spent a lot of time.
So which would you like to talk about first, the capture for entertainment or the capture for food?
Well, we'll talk about the capture for food because it will tie in to the other industry. In the Faroe Islands, they've been catching dolphins and pilot whales, which are in the dolphin family, but they're called small whales, for, I think records go back around 1,000 years. They're remote, rocky islands that don't have a lot of trees or good soil. So in the past, these ancestors of Vikings had their sheep and their fish, and winters were long and hard, and sometimes these pilot whales would come into the fjords as pilot whales sometimes do, and become disoriented. And so the people began to assist them in their beaching and eat the whales. And that tradition stuck. It died out of other areas nearby, like the Hebrides north of Scotland. But the Faroese have kept this, and they call it a tradition, and they think of it as part of their national food, the pilot whale. They have no real concept of the living animals. They tend to dismiss the science that tells us these are very sensitive, intelligent, social creatures. And really where the clash is happening there is over the fact that dolphins, being at the top of the ocean, apex, are full, unfortunately, of toxins and heavy metals and pollutants that we've pumped into the ocean since the Industrial Revolution. So they're actually poison to eat them. Their meat, even by the Faroese health officials, is not recommended as fit for human consumption. Unfortunately, you get these sort of hard-eyed gaffers of the hills who say, well, a mercury is no match for a good, strong whaler, and these guys want to keep hunting and eating these whales. So it's a country struggling to catch up with the science in a lot of ways, but for the time being, they continue the opportunistic hunt of these whales. So some years they don't get any because the whales just don't turn up, and other years they have multiple hunts, and it can get up to about 2,000 whales in a year that they're killing. And when you think of the population of people, there is about 48,000 souls on these islands. That's a lot of whales that they're killing sometimes. So that's one of the situations. And in Japan, there used to be a very widespread whaling and whale and dolphin hunting culture there. It's a modernized country now, so this has shrunk to outposts in about a handful of places scattered around the country from the north to the south. And these are little places that have sort of held on tightly to this. Again, they call it a tradition of hunting and eating dolphins. Their government is covering up to a large degree about the pollutants and not telling people that this is poison. But even there, it's sort of dying out. The people who want to uphold this are in their 60s and 70s, and it's fading out, except for one place, which is the infamous Taiji Cove, which people will have seen in the film, The Cove. That's sort of a stronghold of this dolphin hunting at this point in Japan, and there's a reason that this place is still going strong. And it's not because there's young people getting involved in this or a lot of widespread support throughout Japan for hunting dolphins. Most Japanese don't know that their countrymen are hunting or eating dolphins. They don't have a clue. People in Tokyo do not know what's happening in this remote village. The reason why it's continuing is because money is coming in from capturing dolphins at the same time. So they'll go out, catch 50 dolphins, pick out the beautiful ones, maybe get 5 or 10 dolphins that are going to go to aquariums in Japan and all over the world. And for each of those dolphins, they'll get hundreds of thousands of dollars. They could get up to $150,000 for one show dolphin, and they'll only get about $400 to $600 for the meat of the remaining dolphins. So the big money comes in when they take these younger dolphins that are going to go to aquariums. So these guys are keeping their hunting business afloat by subsidizing it with big dollars from the aquarium industry.
Okay, wait a second. So, are you telling me that the meat from an entire dolphin is only worth $400 to $600?
In Japan, yep, that's right, because the market for it is minuscule. The people who want it and eat it are old and dying off. That's less
than the value of a meat from a cow in the United States. That's not very much.
No, it's not, which is why on a business level, this would have died out probably in Taiji too, except for this subsidization from the captivity industry, which is bringing in great money for these guys. So yeah.
And how many dolphins are killed annually in Taiji?
Well, before the film The Cove came out, you were looking at around 2,000 a year. And it's slowly been going down. I think they were under the 1,000 mark for last season, and it is going down. So, but the captures are going up. So these guys are selling less of the dead dolphins, but they're selling more of the live dolphins, and they're keeping the business afloat that way.
How many live dolphins did you say a year from that place?
It's been going up. They're catching over 400 or 500 now. It might be up to 600.
Oh, so there's almost as many are caught live as same ballpark as are killed.
Well, I think the kills were over 1,200 last year, I think. I should have pulled up the numbers for you. We do have the numbers. I just
No. That's all good. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. And there's another thing I just want to mention, which is those. We've all seen those pictures and just horrifying of the slaughters. But at the same time, I've heard about the Faroe Islands and about Japan. But I have to tell you, I had never heard about Peru before with the 12,000. Mm-hmm. And are there? And you mentioned the Solomon Islands. How many are there too? How many are killed there?
They're quite opportunistic in the Solomon Islands, and I don't think all the hunts are reported on because it's so remote. There aren't always observers. But we're looking at hundreds, definitely hundreds for the Solomon Islands when they do get them.
So, do you want to transition to what happens to the live dolphins, or do you want to talk more about the hunts?
Well, I guess we can get into the live ones because that industry in Japan is keeping the brutal hunting and kills alive, basically, of dolphins. Whaling is a separate issue in Japan, but we're talking about dolphins today. So,
wait. Actually, can we back up for a second and talk about the hunt for just a moment longer?
Sure.
When we talk about this, I mean, all I've seen are sort of the after effects when the actual kill when they're in the bloody water. But when we talk about this being a tradition, I mean, I presume that for the most part, they're not actually using traditional methods of going out with rowboats and spears. I mean, what is the technology involved? How do they actually get them up to the shore?
Well, yes, you're quite right. The Taiji takes its pride in history from old-time whaling. And that was, of course, yes, rowing their traditional boats and big teams of guys going after one single whale in rough seas. Sometimes the whale smashed up the boats and got away, and the guys died. And sometimes they got the whale, and the whale died. And there was a balance going on there. These days, instead of the whales, because they've hunted the whales, there's no more. They go after dolphins, and now they have 12 high-powered, top-of-the-line modern boats that go out and in a fleet, and they spread out to the horizon and travel up to 40 miles out into the ocean and stay in contact in radio. And when someone finds dolphins, they surround them and drive them towards the shallows by banging on these metal pipes with hammers that stick into the water, and they make this terrible noise. And it's a type of sound that will be very painful to dolphins with their sensitive sense of hearing and echolocation, and this disorients them and causes them pain and upsets them, and they just run. And so these boats drive the direction that they're running and make sure it's into the shallows as opposed to out to sea. Sometimes the dolphins do escape. Their tendency when in trouble is to stick together and support each other And that is their undoing, because as long as they stick together, the boats can drive them. If they will dive and separate, which is not their instinct to do, then they can foil the boats. So they're driven into the shallows, into the infamous cove that people may have seen in the film, and there they're netted off. And if they're going to take some for captivity, the aquarium staff from international aquariums as well as Japanese aquariums all get in there with the hunters side by side and pick the dolphins that they think are pretty, and they'll take those ones aside and load them kicking and screaming into stretchers and cart them off to go into trucks and start taking them away. Some of them are put into pens to acclimatize, and then when that's out of the way, the hunters come in and they drive the dolphins onto the beach. They secure their tails with ropes to shore, and they used to spear the dolphins to death, which is what you see in the cove. Because of all the bad press, they've started covering everything there up with huge plastic tarps so that people can't film it, people can't see it. Even though there's police and Coast Guard and everything there now because there's protesters and it's become a very central area of upset, they cover this up so no one can actually see what's happening. The Japanese police don't really know what's happening. Nobody but this little coven of hunters sees what happens. Our hidden cameras have seen what they're doing back there, and they, in order to keep the water from turning that incriminating shade of blood red, they spear the dolphins in the back of the head. They're attempting to sever the spinal column, but that doesn't seem to be successful. So they hammer this spike into the back of the dolphin's head, and then so the blood doesn't pour into the water, they hammer a cork plug into the hole so that the blood doesn't come out. And we've seen what this does to the dolphins. They die over minutes. It takes minutes of them struggling and flailing. Their tails are tied to shore. They're watching this happen to their friends and family all around them. And it's absolutely horrific. And this extra suffering that's being done where they can't actually bleed out because this plug has been put in is all just so that people can't photograph the incriminating red water. So it's terrible stuff. All those aquarium staff are they're party to this, and they turn a blind eye and go back to their aquariums with their captives and tell the whole world how much they love dolphins, and they sell tickets at aquariums to people who love dolphins. So that's the irony there, is all these people who think, oh, I love dolphins, don't know that by buying a ticket they're actually supporting this terrible stuff that's happening but being hidden.
You know, I am known in my work for being able to face the horrors of this culture and to take them in and to metabolize them and to then try to respond to them. And I mean, my books are known for being very tough for many people to read because of that. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you that I think you are stronger than I am. I don't know that I could do that. I'm just saying this in terms of profound respect for you and for everyone else who is able to stand in the face of this and to watch it and to do that work of metabolizing it for us. I am really overwhelmed at your strength and courage.
Well, I should preface my response by saying I spent nearly 20 years feeling about the Faroe Islands and Japan that they were the last places on this earth that I ever wanted to go. They were the places that frightened me the most because these terrible, dark things were happening there. I never, ever wanted to go there. They were the last places I wanted to go, and circumstance brought me the opportunities, and I didn't know how I'd react either. So you don't know. You can't predict till you're there. What I can say is, having been in the face of this, is what has got me through is a long view. At the moment that you're documenting it or witnessing it, you're telling yourself, I'm not going to let this be for nothing. I'm going to take this and I'm going to do the best that I can with it. And these deaths won't go unseen and they won't go unsung, and I'm going to do something with this. That's the only way to deal with that kind of violence and carnage when it's in front of you, is to take that longer view and tell yourself that we're going to make this right. Now, having said that, in these places, these sovereign nations where it's completely legal to do these things, outside pressure is of limited use. We've been trying outside pressure for decades, and it's still happening. So you have to understand, you have to make this kind of change happen from within these countries. You cannot effect change by strong-arming it. You need allies inside the countries. And that's what I came to learn by spending a lot of time in these places. I began to find allies that are Japanese, that are Faroese. I began to spend time with whalers and learn about their side of things. If you don't listen, you're not going to understand what's happening and why it's happening. So the best way to disarm someone is to listen to them and understand them. And that's hard. It's hard to sit down with people that do this and have no problem doing this. But if you're really doing it for the dolphins, you can absolutely do that. That's again the long view, which is you're in it to help make a better future. And the fact is, a better future for the dolphins could very easily equal a better future for the people that hunt them, because all over the world, coastal communities have turned to whale and dolphin watching. They've begun to value these creatures alive instead of dead. Alive and free, I should add, and they're learning that you can reap the rewards from that, and bring income and bring in jobs for young people, because a lot of these places just have old people. All the young people went away to the city, and the old people are holding on to the old ways. So the communities are suffering in their own ways too.
Thank you for that. And I want to say one more thing about that, and then ask you about the more about the live capture. That the other thing I want to say is, one of the things that gets me through, and thank you so much for everything you said, one of the things that gets me through a lot of the horrors that I see in the research that I do is the recognition that I still have the opportunity to turn away. You know, if I'm reading something that's really, really hard, or if I'm witnessing something that's really, really hard, and then I want to turn away, I stop and think, you know what, the dolphin cannot turn away. And, you know, my pain in witnessing is completely trivial compared to the pain of those who are the actual victims. And then
absolutely. And
then I go, oh well, shoot! I stop feeling sorry for myself and get my empathy back to where it should be in the first place, which is with the real victims.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've definitely been right exactly there and thought, as awful and hellish as this is, you know, look what's happening. It's nothing. Yeah, absolutely. It's perspective. Perspective can give you a lot of strength and a lot of determination.
So let's talk about how wonderful aquariums are, and how much the dolphins actually do want to be in close contact with human beings in a tank.
Okay, well, we've had sort of our aquarium culture since the 1950s, and now we make bigger, fancier tanks and pools and pens, but really it all comes down to a wide-ranging oceanic creature in a tiny concrete bathtub. So to dress that up, you know, people put on shows, and there's lights, and there's bubbly trainers talking about things, and a big spectacle. And since ancient times, spectacles have drawn humans and made money for the people putting on the spectacles. So that's sort of what's at the center of this. Another thing that you'll see in places like SeaWorld is they have made these places look like holiday resorts for human beings. And so people begin to think, wow, these dolphins, they're performers. Everybody wants to be a star, after all, and everyone loves them and adores them, and they live all day long in a resort. And they don't have to do anything. They don't have to fight in the big, wild, scary ocean. They hang out in a resort and are superstars all day long. And they have the best care in the world. And that's what the aquariums want you to think, and that's the impression they're trying to give. So everything is put together from a human perspective. Tanks are made not for the comfort of the animals inside them. They're made so that we can have a good look at them. And this idea that everything's like a resort and that they're stars and they're performers and they love it, it's just projecting sort of our own silly desires and imaginations upon them. But really what we're looking at are top oceanic predators who evolved for 50 million years to be out in the open ocean and who can travel 50 miles a day, and who are known for their infamous love of surfing and leaping through the waves, something they'll never be able to do again in a tank. So we take away their freedom, we take away their natural families and social bonds, which mean the world to them. They don't have any possessions, they just have each other. And so each other is what is their universe. And we take that to pieces and put them in concrete boxes and think everything's good. But if you really have a critical look at this of what dolphins really are and what their needs really are, you'll see no tank or pool or pen could be big enough to give them what they actually need as a biological creature. Their natural needs it cannot be met in these kinds of environments. So we suspend recognition of those things for the enjoyment of the moment of getting close to them. I will not deny they are enchanting and beautiful and amazing to get close to. It's simply deciding to become aware and then making a selfish or a non-selfish choice.
I mean, that's really the question, is what does the dolphin get out of that relationship?
Well, I'll tell you, there's two things that happen when a dolphin is born into captivity or a dolphin is captured and put into captivity. One type can't handle it, and pretty early on, they lose the will to live and they die. And that happens to a good deal of them, sometimes up to 50% of them. They can't do it. The other ones, for whatever reason in their personal makeup, decide to make the best of it. And that is a real dolphin type characteristic, I think, is to see what's going on and try to make the best of it. So they don't harbor the same type of resentments a lot of times that human beings would in a similar situation. And maybe some people would call it the Stockholm syndrome, where they're just traumatized and trying to survive. But they are naturally gregarious, so they can form friendships with certain human beings and try to use those to fill in the gaps of their lacking natural social scope. So some of them can try to make the best out of it, but you're fooling yourself if you think for one moment that a couple of loving human friends in a concrete box can make up for hundreds of pod mates in the ocean and being able to choose where you go and what you eat and what you do. People imagine living on holiday forever, like the dolphins seem to be in these resorts, would be wonderful. But imagine if you were always stuck in that hotel room. You couldn't go surfing, you couldn't go hiking, you couldn't go see your brother or your mother or your child. If that was all cut off from you, your choice, your freedom of choice has been taken away. And that's probably the most basic thing that we have to think about for them.
I always think of this in terms of how would you feel if aliens, space aliens came down and they wiped out your entire family, and since you're one of the pretty ones, they pick you and they take you up to a space station and they put you in their little cubicle, and then all the aliens come and gawk at you all the time. And yeah, some of us would lose the will to live and would die. Some of us would kill ourselves, and some of us would go, well, my family's dead, and I am now in a prison, and I'm going to make the best of the life that I can, and would come to accept any affection that you get from these strange aliens. I think it's a one-to-one correspondence, really, in many ways.
I agree. Yeah, that's a great way to try and help people understand what's going on there. Now, I know the excuses given for this are conservation and education and science, so we can get into that really briefly. Increasingly, the scientists are going out into the ocean to study these creatures in their natural environment, in their natural groups, which is where you're going to find real information. A dolphin in a pool with a fake social group isn't really a dolphin. It isn't doing the things that dolphins naturally do. And when you get down to it, loftily saying we're studying how the dolphins swim or breathe for science, that means for human curiosity. That's what it is. So they're suffering, they're dying, they're et cetera, et cetera. Why? For human curiosity. Let's just let them be in the ocean and study them there if we need to. Conservation, the message you get from seeing a dolphin in a pool isn't run right out there and save the dolphins in the ocean. It's, oh, the ocean's bad and scary. Aren't they happier in this little box performing for us? That doesn't tell you that you need to go out there and save them. There's millions of people going to SeaWorld and aquariums. They aren't going through the turnstiles and marching back out there and saving the planet. They're going for a spectacle. It's very little different from sort of watching anything else, from watching monster trucks. You know, you go, wow, that was neat. Okay, next. It's not making a mindset that makes people dedicated to saving the oceans. There's exceptions, I'm sure, within those millions of people, but a lot of the people that I know and work with and have for, over 25 years now, were inspired by wild dolphins, or if they were inspired by aquarium dolphins, it was to say, this was sad, this made me feel something was wrong, and I looked into it, and that launched my conservation career. So those excuses aren't really flying anymore with our modern knowledge. To say this is about education, you can get on a boat and head to the seashore, or you can watch, any one of many, many amazing documentaries that take you into their world and tell you all about them. And that's a great way to learn about dolphins without having to ruin lives.
I live in bear territory, and I see bears literally every single day. And I see mothers with their babies. I see mothers nursing. I see... And the bears are outside. And the point is, they come when they want and they go when they want. And the relationship is not fundamentally pornographic. I think that the relationship of humans and zoos or aquariums is fundamentally pornographic, and that there's the person devouring the spectacle, consuming the spectacle, and there is the captive object who is on display for you. And the lesson I think is really important from the real world is, if you want to have a relationship with bears, then you need to act such that bears want to be around you. And if you want to have a relationship with dolphins, then you need to act such that dolphins actually want to come to you. I mean, it's no different than any if I want to have friends, then gosh, maybe I should act such that people want to be my friend.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm going to capture you, I'm going to kill all your family, and then you're going to be my friend, So this is all sort of a long way of getting to. We have about 5 minutes left, and one of the things I really want to ask you before we sum up somehow is so how did you get started? What drove you to this?
I wrote a book called Rekindling the Waters, The Truth About Swimming with Dolphins, and that sort of details the whole story. But in a nutshell, I encountered captive dolphins by not looking for them when I was about 16 in Cuba, and was really struck not by the performing side of things, but at a quiet moment. This was in a lagoon, a natural lagoon that had been netted off, when one of them came up to me and looked at me, and I realized these were intensely aware creatures that had nothing to do with the squeaking and the ball bouncing and the hoop jumping. That was clowning around for fish to make a living, to eat. I saw these intensely aware beings, and this whole world of fascination opened up, because they were persons. What makes me a person recognized what makes them a person by looking in their eyes. And then the year after, I got involved in a local chapter of a dolphin conservation thing back in Toronto, and started working avidly there. I was sent to represent them at a conference in Hawaii in 1992, and was swimming out in the ocean in Hawaii, where there were whales and dolphins out there. But I was swimming out and in very deep water, and spinner dolphins came around, and they were visiting, and a group of 9 big males came and checked me out and then brought me over to where the mums and babies were. And I never chased them. I let them come, I let them go. And the water got deeper and deeper, and the dolphins faded away. And I could hear them now, but I couldn't see them anymore. And then these shapes came out of the blue and started circling me. And it was 2 huge blue marlin, which are about 12 feet long. They're just enormous. They're amazing looking fish. And they've got a spear on their nose about 2 feet long. And immediately I thought, what do I know about these creatures? And I know they're extremely fast, and occasionally they are aggressive and have injured and killed people by spearing them. And there's just sort of we don't understand what sets them off. And these pair of marlins started circling me and getting closer and closer and closer. And when you're in the ocean, you're part of the food chain. You know when you're being hunted, and it's not a comfortable feeling. And I knew I was in some form of trouble, and I dove deep down into the water where sound carries better, and I just let out a dolphin distress call to my best ability. I didn't think about it, I didn't plan it, I just did it. And the dolphins answered me, and I did it again, and they answered me. But by then, the marlin were just an arm's length away. You could see every single scale. And I knew I was in trouble. And I called again, and they answered again. And suddenly that group of 9 male spinner dolphins came flying in like fighter planes, all in formation, and surrounded me. And in a blink of an eye, the marlin were gone. They're so fast. And these dolphins surrounded me and calmed me down, looking me right in the eye, reassuring me that I was safe. And they swam me slowly all the way back into the shallow water, and then they just disappeared. So they saved my life, and I have no problem with spending the rest of mine trying to help them and save their lives.
So that would be a wonderful point to end. But do you want to say anything about what people can do to help you with your work and to help dolphins in general?
Well, the most important thing is please don't buy a ticket. Never buy a ticket to a captive dolphin attraction or a dolphin show. That's the most important thing. Please, if you're going to eat fish, research it so that you know it's being caught responsibly, meaning 1 fish at a time, basically, not netting. And you can go to my website, rekindlingthewaters.com, and see a bit more about my book and my work. I work with a lot of different NGOs, so I usually encourage people in their country of origin to look at what's happening locally and support that. But please, if people are interested in my work, they can email me on the website, and I can tell them more about what I'm doing. I am doing a lot of things we've just sort of encapsulated for the show.
Well, thank you so much for your work, and thank you for being on the program. And I would like to thank listeners for listening. My guest today has been Leah Lemieux. This is Derrick Jensen from Resistance Radio on the Progressive Radio Network.